Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today for this very interesting topic on a new grant that was just announced in mid-December by the South Carolina Department of Agriculture, the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant. And today I will be presenting this topic to you and with support from Hannah Arndt with the South Carolina Department of Agriculture. Hannah is the one that's spearheading this, and she's been very busy fielding questions, just as I have. The SBDC, South Carolina Small Business Development Center, if you don't know, is an SBA resource partner, and it's hosted by a consortium of state universities in South Carolina. USC, Clemson, Winthrop, and South Carolina State University. And I'm an agribusiness specialist at University of South Carolina region, SBDC. And the South Carolina Department of Agriculture has worked with the SBDC to offer technical assistance on the RFSI grant. So I am available to help folks submit this grant and answer questions and just be a resource, to anything dealing with this grant. So today the agenda is going to basically look at the RFA, the request for applications, which was the publication that the Department of Agriculture put out last December, and it outlines the program, answers a lot of questions. I won't go through the whole RFA, but we will go through a good bit of it just to get an idea. Also, we're gonna walk through the equipment grant, and actually, Hannah, I don't know if she knows this, but it's gonna be her video recording of just kind of stepping through the grant application. And then we're gonna walk through the infrastructure grant, and as you'll see, if you don't know much about RFSI yet, there's two programs or two aspects, two applications. So you can go through the equipment or the infrastructure grant or both. And then we'll do questions and answers. With Q&A, we're not gonna try not to answer questions during the presentation, but you can put them in chat or in the Q&A function. I don't know if we have the Q&A function on this particular type of platform, but you can put them in the chat and we'll answer Q&A at the end, because what happens is people ask questions and then you turn around and they're answered, throughout the presentation. So we like to try to keep that to the end. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. There always are. So we'll do our best to answer them. And if we can't answer them, then we will find an answer for you and get back with you a little bit later. So with that, Hannah, do you want to have anything you want to say before I get started in on some of the content?
I guess just thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and thank you, Jen, for putting all of this together. I think it'll be really helpful for us. And just, if you don't have enough time, or if you need any questions answered, or if you think of more questions after this, you can feel free to contact me, and I'll put my contact information in the chat just so everyone has it.
Yeah, so Hannah's contact information is pretty simple. I think it's RFSI at the Department of Ag website. But a lot of my questions go to Hannah too. So either way, we'll try to find you an answer. So RFSI, this is the RFA for the grant. Basically, you can see that through the RFSI announcement here that you have a couple deadlines. February 9th is the deadline for the simplified equipment grant. And then March 1st is the deadline for the infrastructure grant. So those are two important dates to consider. They have 4.1 million approximately in funding, and the infrastructure grants will range from 100,000 to 2.4 million. but I would not ask for 2.4 million because that would be all their money. And they're probably not likely to make one award for infrastructure grant. And then the equipment grants are between 10,000 and 100,000. So let's see, we'll go through the executive summary here, and the purpose, and then over the South Carolina priorities. So the USDA, and this comes through the Agricultural Marketing Service, AMS, they entered an agreement with the South Carolina Department of Ag to administer this RFSI, Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program. So SBDC is the administrator in South Carolina. USDA is still involved in this process, and ultimately it's the USDA decision. So the state is the one that's administering it though. USDA awarded this infrastructure to support middle of the supply chain infrastructure for domestic food and farm businesses, other eligible entities. Funds will support expanded capacity for aggregation. And these are key words here: for aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, and distribution of locally and regionally produced food products. And this includes specialty crops, dairy grains, and other row crops for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. So a couple of items that are excluded from this grant are meat and poultry and wild caught seafood. So any projects that involve those are not eligible. So just keep that in mind. The infrastructure grant applicants may apply for minimum federal award of 100,000, a maximum of 2.4 million. But like I said, on the infrastructure side, they only have 2.4 million, I believe. So you wouldn't want to probably apply for that much. Projects may start on July 25th, 2024, and must be completed by May 24th, 2027. So you have 2 years to finish a project. And the timeline, really, we'll get into the timeline a little bit later, but that's when you can really start getting your reimbursements after July 25th. Grant applicants are required to contribute 50% of the total project or proposed project costs as a match to the federal funding. And this is for infrastructure grants that we're talking about here. For historically underserved farmers and ranchers and small businesses that qualify under the SBA, including small disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, and veteran-owned small businesses, have a required match of 25%. So you can get that 50% match reduced to 25% if you fall in one of the following classifications of, underserved farmer, rancher, small business. And we can help determine eligibility. We can look up the standards for SBA, see if you fall within one of those classes. But yeah, that's definitely helpful, if you're going for the infrastructure grant. So you got this infrastructure grant, right? And it's for bigger projects. But then you also have a simplified equipment only grant that you can apply for. That's between 10 and 100,000. And same thing, the projects can start July 25th, but must be completed within 2 years. And there's no match requirement for the simplified equipment only. And when they say equipment only, that's it, equipment only. It doesn't pay for installation, any of these other things. It just pays for the equipment. So keep that in mind. That's an important aspect of the whole thing. So I'm going to go on down here to another part, to the purpose. I mean, when you're looking at this grant, you really need to consider the purpose of it, to decide whether it's the right fit for you or not. And the purpose of RFSI is to build resilience in the middle of the food supply chain and strengthen local and regional food systems by creating new revenue streams for the state's producers. States will make competitive subawards in the form of grants in the middle of the supply chain businesses to create more diverse local and regional market options and create more economic opportunities for communities, allowing them to retain more of the value chain of the dollar. So all this is basically, I mean, the purpose is that middle of the value chain activity. It's not for farm production. It's for post-harvest activities, which include activities like, processing, storage, transportation. We'll go over a couple more examples here in a second. The overall goal of RFSI is to create more and better processing options for local and regional producers across the specialty crops, dairy, grain for food, and so not grain for animal feed, things like that, and other sectors by targeting gaps and opportunities in the pandemic assistance. Food systems that support the agricultural supply chain. So a couple things to bring out of that, and I'm going to be repetitive during this presentation because repetition always helps. Back up the main points of this whole grant, and it gets through to you as well as what you'll need. But this is for processing, and it's really not for individual producers. It's not meant to benefit one independent producer. It's meant to benefit multiple producers in South Carolina. If you think of the whole concept of processing and storage, aggregation, distribution, usually processors work with multiple producers, to create a food product and get it to market. So that's, and a lot of agriculture producers do that, right? You have a processing component of your operation, and maybe you already work with other farmers as well. But kind of the whole concept or purpose of this is to help as many folks as possible, right? As many farmers, as many processors, to the most economic impact and producer impact as possible. So keep that in mind. Says the primary focus of the RFSI is to support food system crops and products meant for human consumption, excluding meat and poultry products, because they have some other programs that they use to fund those projects. Ineligible projects are, of course, meat and poultry, wild caught seafood, exclusively animal feed and forage products, fiber, landscaping products, tobacco, and dietary supplements. So you see the aims here. These are USDA aims for the whole RFSI program. They want to support the development of value-added products available to consumers. They want to support and provide fair prices, fair wages, and new and safe job opportunities, and keep the profits in rural communities. So you're going to find out a little bit more about stress counties and the stress communities. So those are ideas. How can it impact those communities and help those rural communities as well? And worker safety is another big thing. So if some of these projects can enhance worker safety on the farm or in the operation, those are just added benefits to the application that would help. So the South Carolina Department of Ag held several sessions last year to kind of determine and set South Carolina RFSI funding priorities. And those priorities, your project should fulfill at least one of these priorities, right? So these priorities are included here. These are 4 of them. One of the priorities are for projects that increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute product through the construction, expansion, or modernization of cold and dry storage facilities. So cold and dry storage is a focus area. South Carolina basically is trying to build capacity in that area. So the more access and capacity that farmers and producers have to that, that's better for overall for the South Carolina food system. Then the second was projects that increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute product through the creation of additional transportation to move product and increase distribution channels through the construction, expansion, and modernization of distribution facilities. So the key word there is transportation, right? Moving products to market, right? That's could be another capacity issues for producers and processors. The third is projects that increase processing capacity, creating new distribution channels and markets for value-added products. So kind of the keywords there is the value-added products, and distribution channels and markets. And lastly, projects that purchase and modernize middle of the food supply chain equipment, packaging, and food safety and labor needs, and increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute agricultural products. So if it's some middle of the food supply chain project, that's going to be helpful, and that would meet one of the South Carolina funding priority criteria. So these are the priorities that you need to check the box on at least one of those whenever you're going through the grant process. I'm gonna go through next. I'm gonna skip down to some good examples of activities for these projects. And the first one here is expanding processing capacities, including adding product types, increasing production volumes, and supporting new wholesale retail product lines, modernizing your equipment, purchasing and installing specialized equipment, such as some processing components, sorting equipment, packing and labeling, delivery vehicles, modernizing your tracking and storage and manufacturing technology systems, enhancing worker safety through improvements of your facilities and new equipment that makes things a little bit safer, construction of a new facility. And these are all projects for the infrastructure grant. Some of these could be eligible for the equipment grant, but remember, it's the equipment only for that particular grant. Increasing packaging and labeling capacities, increasing storage space, including cold storage. Develop, customize, and install climate smart equipment that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Increase efficiency in water use, improves air and air quality, and or meets one or more of the USDA's climate action goals. And in a lot of cases, your project might be doing multiple of these, right? You could be installing cold storage, but that also increases your efficiency in the operation. So if you can actually check multiple boxes that you're doing, different things, then that's probably helpful. Modernize equipment facilities to ensure food safety, and training on the use of equipment purchased under the grant and associated with new processes. So these are a couple of examples, maybe of projects that would be good under the infrastructure grant. And I'm not going to go over all the other, there's some other stuff involved in the infrastructure grant that you might have to do if you won the award. I will highlight again ineligible projects, because this is pretty important. You can't buy real property or acquire real property, including land purchases, or you can't acquire an interest in any property. So it's not meant to buy real estate or property. Can't focus on meat and poultry processing or any of those type things noted in section B. Activities that have received federal funding before or a federal award from another federal source, you can't duplicate activities. And from my experience, this might come up with some producers and folks have gotten the value-added producer grant, or maybe you've gotten an NRCS grant or cost share where you received award. It's just you can't duplicate activities where you receive funds, from those other programs or any federal program. So just keep that in mind if you got a VAPG before. Claiming expenses that have been or will be reimbursed under any federal, state, or local government funding. And they just don't want you to double dip, so to speak, right? They don't want you to duplicate what you're already getting paid for. And then projects which have already received funding from another federal grant or subaward. So those would all be ineligible, and I'll email out this RFA to everybody so they can go through it at their own leisure as well. There's a section here in section F that describes the equipment only grant, which are projects between 10,000 and 100,000, and that also are just for equipment only. Doesn't include facility upgrades, staffing, other costs, installation, any of that, just the equipment. And when we go through the applications, it'll come more clear as well. When we get to the applications, we'll talk a little bit more about matches for the infrastructure grant. There, like I mentioned earlier, there's a 50% match, and you have to, show your contribution. So if you have a $500,000 project, then 250,000 would come from the grant, and 250,000 would come from your business, from your own owner investment. So yeah, that's pretty important, because you'll have to verify those matching funds. And this is a reimbursement grant. So it is paid again after July 25th is the first, the earliest that you would be able to recoup money on the project. So you have to basically show that you have the funds available to cover the whole project and with your match, as part of the process of applying. And of course, I mentioned earlier, available funding is 4.1 million, 2.4, I believe, for the 2.4 for the infrastructure, and about $1.5 million or so for the equipment grant. The timeline here, you've got February 9th, the equipment grants are due. March 1st, the infrastructure grant is due. There will be a 60-day review period. So you really won't begin hearing if you got the grant until late May, late spring. And then if you do receive an award, you'll get notification of that, but the funding for that award won't start until after July 25th. And the overall period stops. It closes out about in 2 years. So May 24th, 2027. So with that, I will go down and review. Let's see. I'm not going to do eligible entities. We'll get that elsewhere. Why don't we jump over to the applications, and then we'll come back over to the project evaluation, which the project evaluation is basically how they're going to score these applications, right? So if you know how they're scoring these applications and where the evaluation criteria lies, then that might give you a good idea of how to strategically write the grant. So let me go over here to, let's see. We're going to do the equipment only application first. It's about a 5-minute video where Hannah steps you through how to complete the application and the different parts of the application.
RFSI Simplified Equipment Grant is for purchases of equipment ranging from $10,000 to $100,000 with no match requirement. Applications go live December 15th, 2023, and will close February 9th, 2024, followed by a review period. Please keep in mind that equipment purchases should be for middle of the supply chain activities such as processing, not for harvesting or production. Examples of eligible equipment are special purpose equipment as defined by the USDA, such as canners, hulling processors, egg packing machines, delivery vehicles, etc. Any equipment that requires additional installation, for example, a cooler that needs electrical wiring installed, will count as an infrastructure project. Before starting your application, please download and save the template before you start filling it out. Otherwise, you will not be able to save your work. Applications may be submitted virtually to the SCDA RFSI email, RFSI at scda.sc.gov. Equipment requests must align with the identified areas of priority for South Carolina. Projects that increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute product through the construction, expansion, or modernization of cold and dry storage facilities. Projects that increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute product through the creation of additional transportation to move product, and that increase distribution channels through the construction, expansion, or modernization of distribution facilities. Projects that increase processing capacity, creating new distribution channels and markets for value-added products. Projects that purchase and or modernize middle of the food supply chain equipment, packaging, and food safety and labor needs, and increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute agricultural products. And with that background, we'll go ahead and get into the simplified equipment only grant template application that you can find on our website. So this first page of the application is mostly background information on you as the applicant. The most important items to note are the UEI and the primary point of contact. The primary point of contact will be the person who will be authorized to sign all grant-related paperwork. You can find more information on how to get your UEI number on our website. You will need your UEI number to receive the grant, and it is best to start the process now. You can go to sam.gov to start this process. It does not cost anything. So moving on to page 2, the Distressed Communities Index map shows the distress score of each county benefiting from your project. If your project borders state lines, you can include the counties impacted by the project. However, please note that the project must primarily take place in and serve South Carolina. You will then choose your applicant type from the list and provide a project title. The executive summary should include the project purpose, deliverables, outcomes, tasks, and activities. Deliverables are the goods and services provided upon completion of a project. For example, X number of new locations, process X number of new products, construct X number of new facilities, or purchase X number of pieces of equipment. The outcomes are how the project will help you and other producers and processors. This could be new jobs, number of producers benefiting from your facility, number of new products you process, store, and distribute, or number of new markets reached. Tasks are the activities you need to complete to fulfill this goal. For example, modernizing or upgrading a processing line, training employees on new equipment, worker safety training, or specific types of equipment needed and for what purpose. Page 3 of the application starts where you will choose which part of middle of the supply chain the equipment purchase will be used for, followed by listing the agricultural food products that will be processed. Please keep in mind that meat, poultry, and wild-caught seafood are not included under RFSI and should not be listed. The scope of work should provide the reviewers with a clear picture of how your project will meet the needs of producers and the state's priorities. Focus on the needs that you and other producers and processors are facing and how this equipment will help solve those issues. On this page, when thinking about project beneficiaries, describe how this equipment will impact other producers, processors, consumers, and others, and how it will open new access to markets or help the food supply chain. Provide an estimate of the producers this project will impact. Next, select any and all of the provided project beneficiaries. Keep in mind that all estimates must be justifiable. For the expected performance measures, there may be boxes that do not apply to your equipment purchase and project. This will not count against you, as the importance weighs more on the justifications of the impacts that your project will have. The next selection is related to budget. Applicants must submit documentation to substantiate the cost of each piece of equipment including contracts, catalog pricing, or binding quotes. Equipment purchases can be used, but it must be in good working condition. If the critical resources and infrastructure letter of support applies to your equipment project, you can find the template on our website. Remember to be specific in your application.
So that is a good overview of the equipment only grant. So next we're going to move over to the infrastructure grant. This video is a little bit longer because the application is much longer. I think the application is maybe 2-3 times as long as the other one. Much more in depth and detailed, but more to the infrastructure grant proposal. And after we go through these, we'll go through the scoring evaluation and look at some approaches and then do some Q&A as well. So
For the aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, and distribution of locally and regionally produced food products, including specialty crops, dairy, grains for consumption, aquaculture, and other food products, excluding meat, poultry, and wild-caught seafood. Funding requests may range from $100,000 to $2.4 million. There is a 50% match requirement unless you self-certify as underserved as defined by the USDA, which is listed on the RFSI website and in the application, with a 25% match requirement. Applications go live December 15th, 2023, and will close March 1st, 2024, followed by a review period. Please keep in mind that project proposals should be for middle of the supply chain activities like processing and not for harvesting or production. Examples of eligible products include upgrades or new facilities for processing ag products, purchase and installation of specialized equipment, increasing storage space, and more. Before starting your application, please download and save the template before you start filling it out. Otherwise, you will not be able to save your work. Applications may be submitted virtually to the SCDA RFSI email, rfsi@scda.sc.gov. Project proposals must align with the identified areas of priority for South Carolina. Projects that increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute product through the construction, expansion, or modernization of cold and dry storage facilities. Projects that increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute product through the creation of additional transportation to move product, and that increase distribution channels through the construction, expansion, or modernization of distribution facilities. Projects that increase processing capacity, creating new distribution channels and markets for value-added products, and projects that purchase and or modernize middle of the food supply chain equipment, packaging, and food safety and labor needs, and increase local producers' abilities to process, aggregate, and distribute agricultural products. So after that background, we can get into the grant application template for our infrastructure grant program. On this first page of the application, it's mostly background information on you as the applicant. The most important items to note are the UEI and the primary point of contact. The primary point of contact will be the person who will be authorized to sign all grant-related paperwork. You can find more information on how to get your UEI number on our website. You will need your UEI number to receive the grant, and it is best to start the process now. You can go to sam.gov to start this process. It does not cost anything. Please note that the entity type on page 1 of the application should be listed as the same selection under type of applicant on page 2 of the application. So moving on to page 2. The Distressed Communities index map shows the distress score of each county benefiting from your project. If your project borders state lines, you can include the counties impacted by the project. However, please note that the project must primarily take place in and serve South Carolina. You will then choose your applicant type from the list and provide a project title. The duration of your project should begin no sooner than July 25th, 2024. Timeline anytime through May 25th, 2027. It will not hurt you to push the end date close to the end of the grant timeline. This may allow you more time to complete your project and you won't have to ask for an extension. The executive summary should include the project purpose, deliverables, outcomes, tasks, and activities. Deliverables are the goods and services provided upon completion of a project. For example, X number of new locations, process X number of new products, construct X number of new facilities, or purchase X number of new pieces of equipment. Outcomes are how the project will help you and other producers and processors. For example, new jobs, number of producers benefiting from your facility, number of new products you process, store, and distribute, or number of new markets reached. Tasks are the activities you need to complete to fulfill this goal. For example, modernizing or upgrading a processing line, training employees on new equipment, worker safety training, or specific types of equipment needed and for what purpose. After the executive summary, you will then elect your project purpose. You may select all that apply to your project. On this next page, you should describe the specific issues or problems that you and other producers and processors are facing. Your project objectives are similar to your deliverables, outcomes, and tasks. State what you are doing and the purpose. For example, construct X number of new facilities for the purpose of X. Provide access to X number of producers or create X number of value-added products. Please keep in mind that your project beneficiaries are producers and processors along the middle of the supply chain and not consumers. Provide an estimate of the producers this project will impact. Next, select any and all of the provided project beneficiaries. Keep in mind that all estimates should be justifiable. If this exact project has been submitted for a federal or state grant, you must claim that you have. For most people, this answer will be no. On page 5, you can talk about the consumers and markets that this project will service alongside the local producers and processors. For the expected performance measures, there may be boxes that do not apply to your project. This will not count against you, as the importance weighs more on the justifications of the impacts that your project will have. Page 6 begins the budget narrative. Again, all eligible entities must provide a 50% match or a 25% graduated match of the total project cost. You may self-certify by choosing one or multiple of the USDA defined groups. For the budget summary, I recommend doing this section last after figuring out the other budget sections that follow. Please note that these categories do not have to have a 50 or 25% match across each category, but as the total match amount of all the categories. For example, a potential category could be payroll. For page 7, stronger applications will not only list personnel, but include what they will specifically do for the project, the detail of their role, and list more than just the job title and the personnel justification. The same goes for page 8 for travel justification. Again, stronger applications will not only list travel, but be specific in their justifications. For this next page for equipment and supplies, please note the requirements for special purpose equipment and supplies. Equipment must have a useful life of more than 1 year. Both equipment and supplies must have an acquisition cost that equals or exceeds $5,000 per unit. Under construction cost and justifications, break out your costs for each item, not just a lump sum of all of your construction costs. Again, please be specific in your justifications. For page 11 for contractual, please note that people doing direct construction are often not included in contractual sections. Again, stronger applications will not only list construction and contractual, but be specific in their justifications. The last page of this application is an indirect cost. An example of an indirect cost could be admin not assigned to this project directly, but are involved indirectly, like human resources, finance, and others that will not be billing directly against this project. Again, you can submit your completed application to RFSI at scda.sc.gov.
Okay, so Hannah did a great job of reviewing those applications. So it was much easier just to show her video going over the applications than it is for me to do it. I will point out this is the RFSI on the webpage, on the South Carolina Department of Ag's webpage. You can get there many different ways. You can just Google RFSI SCDA and get to that page. You can just go to their page and navigate to it. There's a lot of great information on here. You can download the applications. You may have some issues downloading it. If you do, there's a nice video that would step you through how to open Adobe Reader and get to the applications. Also, there's some additional resources, some letters that you might need that go with the infrastructure grant, and some other tools to figure out if you fall within a certain category. And there's a frequently asked questions section there too. So great resource just on the website. I recommend to definitely check that out. So you just were able to take a look at the grant applications and get a little bit better idea about what's expected as far as, submitting the application. The first thing that you have to do, though, before you do anything really, is make sure that you have your active UEI number. If you don't have a UEI, which you can get on sam.gov, you can apply for it. Sometimes it might take a couple days to get the number back. So I would do that as soon as possible. You don't want to wait till the last minute to try to apply for the UEI. If you do already have a UEI because you've had, maybe federal applications before, make sure it's active. Some people, they don't renew them like they're supposed to every year because you're just not using them for whatever reason. But just go back in, make sure that you've activated it and it's ready to go. So the big question is, you have these applications, what makes a good proposal? And what makes a good proposal, you can really, work through under the project evaluation criteria. So I'd like to go through that because this is how the projects are going to be evaluated. So you definitely want to know that so you can, put forth the best application possible. There's also, you can submit supplementary documentation. For instance, on the equipment grant, you're going to also attach estimates for those pieces of equipment. So you can put additional attachments on there to hopefully help with justification and backing up claims that you make within the grant. That makes a stronger proposal, right? So if you can attach a support letter from producers that you're working with, and you can attach other documentation that backs up some of the claims that you make in the proposal, it's going to make the proposal stronger. So under the project evaluation, you can see that it says the SCDA will focus funding to projects that meet an identified infrastructure need that correlates to at least one of the South Carolina RFSI funding priorities found in that section C that I reviewed. Remember those are 4 areas or priorities that they identified. So they want to fund projects that meet one of those at least. So that's pretty important, right? And then you want to put that in your narrative somewhere that, you know, this is the South Carolina priority that I'm meeting, right? You want to explicitly say that. Also wants to serve the needs of historically underserved producers, processors, and small food businesses. So if you can do that, that'd be great. Will be made available to or will incorporate product from multiple producers. That's the key word, processors and small food businesses rather than benefit a singular entity. So the key word there is multiple, right? It doesn't want to invest in just the benefits for one farm, right? This needs to be able to benefit multiple farms, multiple producers or processors. Because that will have the most impact. And that's what they're looking for ultimately. What is going to be the highest and best impact for South Carolina? It will provide long-term middle of the food supply chain opportunities, South Carolina producers, processors, and small food businesses. It will create positive impact, economic impact, by providing more and better markets for South Carolina agricultural products, support the development of value-added products for consumers, and encourage fair prices and fair wages, and establish new and safe job opportunities. So I guess the key there is the economic impact, what type of economic impact is going to be created. Offer family supporting job quality and treatment of safety of workers, focus on small and medium-sized enterprises that add options and choices for consumers and producers, emphasized again value added. Demonstrate local support for the project. So if you can get some support letters from, you know, communities that support what you're doing, that might be helpful. And if the proposals are submitted by cooperatives, farmer and worker owned enterprises. So if we go down to the project evaluation criteria, they have 5 criteria areas that reviewers, I assume, will be looking at. And it says each project that meets the minimum eligibility requirements, according to Section A, will be reviewed and scored by an external review panel using this below criteria. So when they're looking at scoring it, you know, these reviewers, this is the information that they're given. They say, hey, these are the five points that you need to look at and consider these proposals. So point 1, criteria 1, the alignment and intent of the proposal. Is it clear and concise? Is the applicant identifies and engages the intended beneficiaries of the proposed project, including the number of beneficiaries and how they will benefit. Again, you've got the number of people, you know, impacted. And the proposed project will support underserved communities in the state. So yeah, when we're looking at the proposals, you want to see your alignment intent and make sure you're you know, definitely referring to all these different aspects and including that if you can. So criteria 2 is the technical merit, which would include extent to which the application presents a clear, well-conceived plan of work that addresses at least one of the South Carolina RFSI funding priorities. It also complies with a written instructions and requirements described in the program scope and requirements of the infrastructure grant program application. So if the application and if it's asking you to do something specifically, and you don't do that, then that's gonna be a mark against you, right? So you have to make sure that you're meeting all the requirements of the grant. You're submitting everything that's required. Otherwise, you know, there's going to be points off there. Achievability. The application presents a realistic schedule for implementing the proposed project. And I guess speaking of schedules, you know, you have 2 years to finish the project. Probably better to put a longer period of time to complete a project versus a shorter period of time. And the reason is if you put too short a period of time, let's just say you were going to start the project in September and you were going to finish, you know, in the end of November. But what happens if you don't finish it in the November of this year? There'd be issues. You have to go back to the USDA and request, for a accommodations for that. So it would be better to maybe say, hey, it's going to end, the spring of the following year. If you think it would take a couple months, I would definitely expect longer. Performance measures are appropriate for the scale and scope of the proposed projects. You should put some performance measures in there. And that goes back to your deliverables and your outcomes, that go along with your project. So it's like, what are the numbers? How is this going to benefit you? Are you going to have, is this going to result in you working with 3 new producers? Are you going to have 2 new markets that you sell to? Is this going to increase your revenue by 30% or the revenues of maybe an aggregate number of producers by a certain percent that you're working with? So need to have some numbers and measures to back up, the project and the economic impact on the project. Application demonstrates local support for the proposed project. Project results in connecting products to end markets. So this all falls under achievability. The budget and resources. The budget for the proposed project is consistent with the size and scope of the project. The applicant provides evidence that critical resources and infrastructure that are necessary for the project are in place. So for instance, if you want to, construct a building that you own the land, or you have control of the land, that you're going to build the facility on, that would be part of the critical resource. And also historically underserved status. The application is submitted by one of the following: historically underserved farmer or rancher, new and beginning farmer, veteran producer, and or processor of middle of value supply chain business owned by socially disadvantaged individuals as defined by the Small Business Administration. So yeah, you can go to the SBA website and look at their definition of socially disadvantaged and see who falls under that definition. But yeah, if you fall within, those groups, then that could be extra points for you as well. So so this is pretty important, when making a proposal to consider what the evaluation criteria is, so that whenever you go to create that application, that it makes sense. So that is an overview of the program. We can definitely take the last few minutes here to answer any questions. And if you have more questions, you can always email us. I'll be glad to try to help you find those questions. And I will mention, as far as a resource for technical support on writing the grant, reviewing the grant, SBDC is doing that. I've been helping folks in putting the grant together and getting it submitted. Also Clemson Extension, Dr. Steve Richards is helping with technical support on that too. And after this seminar, we'll email all that out, the contacts, Hannah's information, my information, Steve Richards' information. And so different resources that you can use, which are all free, to help you with the application. So I'll go to the chat first and see, okay, if there's any questions in particular. I don't necessarily see any questions yet. So we'll open it up. So are there any questions?
Oh, hi, Jim. This is Amelia Patak from the Oconee Food Council. I have a question specifically about when you're going to be checking the boxes of who is benefiting from this. So for us, we work with the food hub that we're helping to put an application together for has a very diverse range of farms. So in that case, would we be checking the box for, for example, one of our farms is a veteran-owned farm. Would we check the box for that because one of our farms is in that category, or does it have to be like a majority of them fit that category? I was just curious about that.
What do you think, Hannah?
So I guess I have a few different answers to that question. So, and it looks a little bit different based off of whatever application you're looking at, infrastructure versus equipment. Both applications ask you who your project will benefit. So if you're working with any veteran producers or small businesses, women-owned farms, you can check that box that those are some of your beneficiaries. I'm actually waiting on a response from USDA about entities self-certifying as underserved. I've actually had a few folks reach out, saying if if I'm the representative for this entity and I qualify and can self-certify, would that count? So I'm still waiting on that, and I can send you the follow-up when I get the answer. But with Jim, what he has pulled up, if your project benefits any of those listed, you can check any and all that apply.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. That helps a lot. I appreciate it, Hannah.
Yep, I'll follow up with you, Amelia.
Okay, thanks.
Looks like we have a question in the chat, which is from Angela. How are we held accountable afterward for reporting? Would we owe anything back if we did not meet certain requirements? I got this question earlier today, so as well. So Hannah, in some cases, the idea is, when you get in some programs, incentives from like the Department of Commerce or other federal maybe funded programs, and you don't it doesn't all come to fruition. Is there a clawback? So you make all these claims in this proposal too, like, maybe by building this facility, it will create a new job, it will create X amount of new products, it will, be economically positive project. So you made these claims, is there a clawback or anything like that that you know of?
Not that I know of right now.
Okay.
So I will say, so this is the first time that the USDA has done this type of infrastructure grant. So they are actually working with a few other agencies that they've outsourced to for construction and infrastructure guidelines, which they are still building. And we will actually be Zooming with them in the next 2 weeks to find out more about that information and what their guidelines and regulations will be, if it is federal or if it's going to be something that's left up to the state to make those decisions. So more coming on that in the next 2 weeks as we have more conversations with the USDA. I know that's not what people want to hear, that there's still things up in the air, especially when there's a tight deadline for applying to these grants. But once I do have an answer, I can share it with you and add it to our FAQ on the website as well. And then as far as reporting requirements, funded projects will have an annual performance and financial report due 30 days after the end of each budget period. And SCDA will supply the template for that. So it won't be anything super crazy or something that you have to make by yourself. So we would supply that and keep up with you as you're going through the project, and remind you when those are due. So that's what the reporting looks like. I'm sorry, I don't have a more solid answer about any sort of clawback right now.
And it is a reimbursable grant, so you have to make the expense, buy the product, and then submit for reimbursement. So that would be part of the ongoing reporting criteria as well. So the next, got another question. I'll be primarily classified as wild caught seafood. From my understanding, I would not be eligible, or am I missing something? So yeah, wild caught seafood is not eligible. Another question from Alan. If requesting funding for equipment that is part of the entire production process, but it is multiple pieces, Should it be counted as one piece and priced accordingly? Could only parts of the equipment be approved? For example, a color sorter and a fill and all fill would run together. So it's two pieces of equipment. I guess they work in conjunction with each other somehow.
I mean, I guess, I'm trying to think about how there would be multiple pieces that make up one piece of equipment. And again, I think you would do it line by line if you have different quotes for each piece that encompasses that one piece of equipment. And I would just be clear, when you're writing your grant and your justifications and providing those quotes and estimates to show that these different pieces comprise one piece of equipment. If that's, the way that it has to be done, and just make sure that that's clear. Especially because if there was a situation where funding requested exceeded the amount of funds that we have, and we did have the opportunity to prorate, we obviously would not want to give you money for part of a piece of equipment and then, not be able to have you complete the entire piece. But if you want to email me and Jim, kind of what you're thinking or what that looks like more, we might be able to give you some more detail on how to put that into your application.
Thank you.
Okay, good questions. All good questions. I know there's always a lot of questions because, like Hannah mentioned, this is a new program for USDA. So I don't know how familiar you all are with USDA programs, but there's always a lot of clarifications and questions. Seems simple on the surface, but when you start to dig down into it, it gets complicated. And that's not just with the new one, that's for existing ones as well. So another question from Amelia. It says, for a food hub looking to expand distribution channels and capacity, if some of our beneficiaries would be meat and poultry producers, can we list them or do we have to exclude them? I'm gonna say exclude, wouldn't you, Hannah? Or yeah.
Yes. So this came up on an office hours call with the USDA a while back, where a state asked, if someone's building a warehouse facility and part of it is going to be used for produce, part of it's going to be used for meat, what should they do? And basically the response was either, choose your words wisely within your application about what you're including, or you would have to go to a lot of links to justify that square footage and list the exact square footage that's being used for meat. So it would be kind of a spiral. So I would say just include the beneficiaries included under the eligible products.
I got a question too. I've got plenty of them, but one question that I've gotten, and I think I've gotten this answer before, but I figured I'd bring it up. If you have like a big project, let's just say you have a project that is a couple $100,000 and you just want to get apply for the simplified grant piece of that project, and you're just buying one or a simplified equipment grant, and you just want to buy one piece of equipment that's going to go in that bigger project, right? That, let's just say that a piece costs $50,000. You can apply for that one piece of a bigger overall project, right?
Right. So you can include that under the equipment portion of the infrastructure grant. If it's, directly related to the bigger project that you have.
Okay. Oh, another question that I got today, and several times, and I've asked you this before too, but I got it stated in a different way.
Okay.
Some folks have projects that they're starting, and they want to go ahead and start these projects like they're ready to start these projects like as soon as possible. or maybe in the next 60 to 90 days. Either way, they want to start the project before, you know, the review period is ended, and they know if they even got the grant or not. So if they put in a grant for this project, and let's just say they started that project in April, would all the work that they do between April and July be ineligible for reimbursement?
Mhm.
Or, you know, if they found later that they were approved, you know, is there kind of a start? And I know you need to put a start date in the application too, right?
Mhm.
So I imagine if you're going to start in April, you need to put you're starting in April. Do you know what type of impact there would be? Would they just kind of exclude those and say those are ineligible because it came after the decision date? Or, you know, it did come after you submitted your application, but it came before your award notification. So I know
Right.
different
I need to-
USDA programs are a little bit different on that particular topic.
Right, I need to talk more with Betsy about that, because actually the commissioner asked me that same question this week too. Because I think even people he's been talking to saying they're kind of geared up and ready to go, even, you know, just anticipating the grant. And I do believe that the USDA would leave it up to states to make that call, but at the same time, I think that if you're going to do that, you have to be, you know, open to the fact that something that we think should be awarded and is eligible, and we submit it to the USDA, if they were to come back to us and say, no, it's not, that you would not be reimbursed for those costs if for some reason the USDA said this grant or this project is ineligible for some reason. So I think that, well, I need to first find out more if pre-award costs would be eligible and how we would do that if we are in some certain circumstances like that. And then based off of that, if we do get an application with the start date before, you know, our award date, I'll just talk with them. I wouldn't want to exclude them for any reason. But I just need to get some more clarification on it before I can say one thing or the other. But I think if someone is planning to do that, or even if they put their start date, you know, within the time period and they start putting their funds towards the project, you know, if they have a bigger project in mind, just keeping that in mind that ultimately it is up to the USDA. We give them our recommendations, but there is that small chance that they could come back and say no. But I'll get some more from Betsy on that and how that would work, and how we would implement that. Sorry, I don't have a firm answer yet.
So at this point, you just give the expectation that it may be ineligible. So,
Right.
you know, and I've had some folks who have a long term of a project too, you know, so it's just maybe it's the later phase that they put in the grant instead of the earlier phase.
Right. I know infrastructure is complicated and lengthy, so I don't blame people for wanting to start.
But like we said earlier, it's kind of like when you get into the details of this grants, a lot of questions come up. So, all right, this is y'all's chance to ask more questions. So, take one or two more questions, and then you're always free to contact us later if you needed us as well. So, any other questions? Okay, so any suggestions for grant matching entities? Okay. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to, if you're doing the infrastructure grant, you have to have documentation that you have a match, whether that's cash or in kind, or you have a line of credit, you know, from a bank or a lending institution that says you have access to X amount of funds that would cover the project. Yeah, I mean, my best thing is if you don't have the funds available, you know, the next best thing's in kind, right? And if you don't have enough in kind to match, you know, in kind could be considered personnel. and also inventory. But you know, it just depends on the size of your organization and you know, and the scope of the project, how big the project is. And if you don't have enough, you know, in kind or cash, then you might need to go to a lending institution. You can, it's kind of a long process and it'd be aggravating getting a letter from them, but FSA, Farm Service Agency, you know, a lot of times they will, you know, do loans and they don't do lines of credit, but they do them for USDA grants like the NRCS and VAPGs and other things like that. But that's usually after they know you're getting the award. But yeah, just an agricultural bank or any bank for that matter, line of credit, you know. But you know, there's a whole underwriting process of that. So if you intend to go to that route and you don't have like a relationship with a bank, then you probably want to get started on that like ASAP. But you know, there's a bunch of different ways to try to accomplish it. Just you can contact me and give you some ideas if that's an issue. Another question, would the equipment grant cover a community certified kitchen renovation? So the renovation of a community certified kitchen. That's I mean that falls under, I think, an eligible project. It's just you have to watch out for all the other elements, you know, that they're looking for in the valuation criteria. One is the equipment needs to be at least $5,000 if you're buying equipment. Sometimes commercial kitchens is just, you know, they're considered supplies, like if you get a 3-compartment sink or if you're doing things like that. If it's a renovation, that's probably going to fall under, I mean, it could be a piece of equipment that you're using for your renovation, right? You just want to buy, you know, one piece of equipment that goes in that kitchen, maybe, you know, I don't know what it might be, but that might be fine. Otherwise, you might, if it comes down to like construction and, you know, things like that, then you're going over to infrastructure. So in that case, it's you know, you can buy supplies on that or equipment and a lot of different things, but it's got to be over $100,000 in that case. So yeah, I mean, it could potentially cover it, whether it's a good project or not. Yeah, I'd be glad to talk to you about that, or you know, Steve at Clemson, we can give you our opinion. You know, it's just our opinion though. So hope that answers that. What do you think, Hannah? We've had a lot of proposed commercial kitchens and
Yeah.
things like that. So
I mean, I think what you said is correct, that if it's, you know, anything beyond the purchase of equipment for equipment used for that renovation, it would be an infrastructure project. But I mean, if you have equipment, I don't know everything about a commercial kitchen, but if you have equipment over that $5,000 threshold, then you can certainly apply for it under the simplified equipment only grant. But if you have some kind of examples that you want to send, Jamie, feel free to do so. And I can take a look at them and just kind of give you more of a definitive, just based off of what you're kind of thinking you might do.
yep. So another question, can capital raise funding from partners count as the match, or should we have it readily available before we submit the application? Well, part of the documentation that you're going to use, I'd imagine, to show that you have the match is, I mean, you could use bank statements. You need some documentation though that says you have the entity that's applying has access to those funds. Could be a bank letter. I would think bank statements, you know, things like that. So I would think if you're raising capital from other people, you know, if they go ahead and pledge that to you and it can be in your account and you can show that, that's probably stronger than if they maybe wrote you a pledge letter, I should say, not pledge, but it actually give you the money. If they pledged it to you, that'd be a weaker I think weaker documentation, I don't even know if that would fly. In some programs, third parties can do that, but then the third party actually has to show they have the money in their accounts to give to you or to support the project. I don't know if that applies with RFSI or not. My thing would be, it'd be a stronger proposal if the money was there, or the in-kind, or the direct documentation saying that you have the access. I hope that answers that question. Another question, I believe they are trying to open one and would need all the equipment. I just received a call about it as they were presenting. Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. Also, great questions. A lot of good questions. All right, well, we have been on for over an hour, so I appreciate everybody's time and coming on to learn more about the RFSI program. It's a wonderful, honestly, a wonderful program and project, much needed. Hopefully, it's kind of a one-time thing, we think, but you never know. Maybe they'll keep it on if they see a lot of success, and if they ever get another farm bill. So who knows? It might stick around. So the more applications and the more good projects that Department of Ag can fund and show that it's a huge success, you know, for the state and for the federal government, right, as a program, then they would consider, you know, doing more of this stuff and coming out with more grants like this. So it's awesome. But I appreciate everyone. Thank you, Hannah, for coming on, answering questions. We really appreciate all the work that you've done on this program. It's been, I know, very tough because y'all, it's a new program. You only have so much information. You're trying to answer a lot of questions. So Hannah's been doing an amazing job, and we definitely thank you for your service. So with that, again, we'll send out contact information for everybody. Some of these resources, feel free to reach out, and look forward to seeing y'all submitting applications. And y'all have a great week. Take care.
And Jim, excuse me, this is Carolyn. We have recorded this event. It will be posted on the SBDC website under training events. And it will be posted probably up until the last week of February, since the deadline, you know, are coming up. But you will be able to watch it at your leisure. So I'll be sending out an email giving you that website and how to get to the training events, as well as I'll be sending out a post-event survey. Just share with us if you enjoyed this event, if the format worked for you, if the information was helpful. That is kind of our report card. So thank you very much. And if everybody is ready to end, we can certainly do so.
Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.